Good morning, Goose. Howdy, folks, and welcome back to Goose Unlimited. I'm your host, Jay. In this video, we're going to go over mounting your optic. When we mount the optic, we're going to go over finding the proper eye relief for your scope, as well as leveling the scope. And then finally, we are going to torque everything down to spec. Before finding your correct eye relief, the thing that you need to do is make sure that you have the correct length of pull. If you have an adjustable stock, this is a lot easier than if you don't. If you have a fixed stock, you can add spacers or you can remove part of the stock to get the length that you want. If you have an adjustable stock, it's pretty simple. So to find the correct length of pull, we're going to take our rifle, we're going to put the buttstock into the elbow. You're going to bend your arm at a 90 degree, and then you're going to place your finger into the trigger guard, and you should be able to have a 90 degree bend at the elbow and a 90 degree bend at the finger. That's going to give you the correct length of pull. Now, whenever we are finding the correct eye relief for the optic, you want to make sure that you have good eye relief at the lowest magnification and at the greatest magnification. You'll find out that whenever you're looking through the optic at the lowest setting, you've got a lot more freedom of movement in that eye relief. You can see better if you're closer or farther. You got a range in which you can see clearly. Whenever you turn it all the way up, you've got less range, you've got less forgiveness in that eye relief. So you want to make sure that you have a good field of view on the highest setting as well as the lowest setting. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do whenever I want to get the eye relief for my optic is get into a good firing position. Typically it's going to be in the prone. I'm going to get behind the rifle, put it in the pocket of my shoulder. I'm going to get comfortable and relaxed. I'm going to close my eyes and then find my cheek weld and then open my eyes. Close my eyes, find a good cheek weld, open my eye again, and just get that natural point of aim to see where it's coming in at. I'm going to do that for the lowest setting. Switch it up to the highest setting and do the same thing. Find that cheek weld, natural point of aim, open my eyes, do it again. Once I know that my cheek weld is the same every time, then I can adjust the magnification in and out. And that will tell me if I need to bring my scope forward or backwards. Then you'll go and make those adjustments. So with the first upper receiver that I put on here, the optic was set pretty well for the eye relief at both high and low magnification. The second scope was put in almost the exact same place, but it's a little bit different. And whenever I came to it, the optic looked great where it was on the highest magnification, but whenever I zoomed out to the lowest magnification, the eye relief was too close. I needed to push the scope forward a little bit, and so I did, going through the same process of finding my natural point of aim, opening my eye, looking through the scope, make sure that everything was clear, adjusted the scope position, and did it again at both low and high magnification. So now it looks good. I tightened the rings back down so that we can move on to the leveling without moving the scope on accident. There's several ways to level your optic, and we're going to discuss a few of them. The first one that we're going to discuss is using shims or different things to make the bottom of the optic parallel to the rings or the mount. Whenever you have a one-piece mount, you could do it. If you had it mounted with two rings directly to the Picatinny rail, you still do it. I think this is a good preliminary step. You can do this as a first step before moving on to the second. I wouldn't use this as a primary step. And the reason is that, yeah, you got a nice flat surface there and you got a flat surface there. You got two flat surfaces. But what you're leveling is actually a round piece of glass inside of a round tube inside of another round tube that we can't guarantee that that reticle is square to the bottom of the optics itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen the rings and we're going to try to fit, I'm using a feeler gauge, and we're going to see where it is and we're going to fit the same side right to left, and that's going to give us a parallel bottom of the scope to the mount. But that's all it's going to do, is making sure that that is parallel to one another. It's not going to guarantee that our reticle inside the optic is actually level. So I've got the rings loosened a little bit and I've grabbed some of the filler gauge leaves and I'm just sticking it in. Got a little bit of movement. I'm going to add the next smaller one because that's a pretty good fit so far. And that's pretty snug. I'm going to throw one more on there and see if it's going to fit or not. And that's not going to fit, so I'm going to remove that last one. I've got that same in the front and the back all the way around. Then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just put it in there. And I'm going to let it sit there, and then I'm going to tighten the rings back down. And with the rings tightened back down, just double check. Still seems pretty even. So the idea is that now the bottom, the flat piece of the scope is parallel to the flat piece of the mount. Once again, this is not going to perfectly level out the reticle. It's just going to get us close so that it makes it easier whenever we do the next part. Quick note, you can see a piece of tape here. What I did is I put some tape in front of the ring just in case I happen to bump the scope whenever the rings are loose. That's going to tell me exactly where I had the eye relief set on the optic. The next step is to now level the reticle, and the way that I typically do this is I set a Plumb Bob up in front of the reticle and I use that, and then I match up the vertical crosshairs in the reticle to the Plumb Bob, because that Plumb Bob is going to be straight vertically. In order to do that, you have to make sure that the upper receiver is level left to right. I've got a level on the back of the receiver. You'll see different kits that'll do, you know, put a level up here, put a level there, whatever. Well, this is not necessarily level to the receiver itself, so you don't want to put a level there. The best thing to do is to level the reticle to something that is leveled. The second thing, or the second way I've seen it done, and we'll show you here in just a second, is to actually shine a light through the optic onto a Plumb Bob behind it, and that's going to let you see the reticle against a flat surface, and then you can rotate the optic until your reticle is true to the Plumb Bob. We're going to do both of those here. The first one, you're not really going to be able to see through the scope, so I'm not going to show it, but I will show the second, shining the reticle through the optic. So with the first method where you're looking through the optic at a Plumb Bob to true up your reticle, you've got to get that good eye relief, and then you're going to be working on it from here. You're going to be manipulating it from this position, and that can be a little challenging. It's easy if you got it with two people, so then you can just tell them, hey, it's good or it's not good. And with the other way, you can do it with one person, but you're still going to be better off if you've got two. So here is the view with the light shining through the optic and the Plumb Bob in front of a background. And you can see here that it's a little off. I'm going to have to move the Plumb Bob a little bit and then readjust. This was a really neat idea that I recently came across. So here's what it looks like whenever you use the light through the optic and a Plumb Bob on a flat surface to see the reticle and how it lines up true vertically. This is a newer thing for me, but it's actually an older technique that I've seen things from. I didn't know what they were, how they worked, and it essentially was this. I'm not going to film me doing the adjustments to get this correct because I'm using one hand to hold the light and everything, and it's just going to be too hard to film. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what this actually looked like on camera. Now I have gone and adjusted it, and I'm amazed that I can actually keep the light through the optic without holding it. And that's looking pretty parallel. So using this method is a little tricky. I ended up measuring from the vertical lines to the Plumb Bob to make sure that it was correct. So here I've actually moved the Plumb Bob over so that it matches up with the reticle better, and I can see very minor deviations between the two. And after inspecting that up close, I'm going to call that good. I'm going to tighten everything down, being very careful not to move the scope. So I'm going to keep the lights off just as it is, because I have in the past caused my scope to rotate whenever I was tightening down the scope rings. And this is not the final torque. We'll do that after what I'm going to do in the next step. Now this next step might seem a little tedious for you guys, but what I'm actually going to do is take a filler gauge and I'm going to measure the gap between the upper and lower rings on both sides, see what the difference is, and then I'm going to adjust as necessary. I'm going in for a 0.024 inch or 0.6 millimeter. All right, so what I've figured out so far is that the rear two screws on the front rings have a little bit more gap than the front, not very much, and then this side of the rear rings has just slightly bit more gap than the ejection port side. So we're going to torque down this side first at 18 inch-pounds and then see how much that closes up the gap, and if we need to, we will loosen this and then torque it back down. And then kind of the same for the front, except we're going to be focusing more on torquing down the back two first. We've got our Wheeler torque wrench right here. For this to adjust, you pull, and then you rotate to wherever you need it to be. And we're going to go in between 15 and 20 for that 18. Tighten it down just a little bit. Okay, and then for the rear, and that far side is already at 18. See where we're fitting. getting pretty close. So we are 0.02 millimeter difference between this side and that side. Okay. Well, folks, it's official. The LR308 build is complete. Off camera, I went in and leveled the second scope. It went a lot smoother than the first one. I did realize that using the filler gauges to make the bottom of the scope parallel with the mount was a waste of time. On the first scope mounting, as you guys saw, that whenever I made the very first adjustment, it just undid any leveling that we did with the filler gauges. But I do recommend that you use the filler gauges on the scope rings. That worked out really well. It went a lot smoother off camera because I didn't have to worry about filming. Highly recommend that. Off camera, I also put on the lens caps, the sunshade, the extra accessories on both upper receivers. So the next video is going to be bore sighting the scopes and then zeroing. It might be a little bit for this project because I need to get a few different types of ammunition. I've got some random 308 stuff, but I don't have any 6.5 Creedmoor and don't really have funds for that. So it might be a while for the next video for this project. I do have some other projects that I will be playing with and a few other videos and contents that I plan on coming out with. So if you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments, suggestions, leave a comment down below. I will be sure to get back to you as soon as I see that. And thank you guys for watching.
See you later, Goose.
Damn dogs.